There's a secret in attraction that most men miss, not because it's complicated, but because it's hidden in plain sight. It's not the jawline, it's not the six-pack, it's not even the smooth one-liners you rehearse in front of the mirror. It's boundaries. Quiet, powerful, magnetic boundaries. And not the kind that are performative alpha behaviors that look tough on the outside but crumble under pressure. I'm talking about the kind of boundaries that grow from a man's inner structure. Boundaries that don't just attract women, they demand a new kind of respect. Because when a man knows where he ends and the world begins, something shifts. Not just in how he moves, but in how women feel in his presence. So today, I want to show you 6 boundaries. Not walls, not manipulation games, but clear lines that signal something deeply primal to the female subconscious. This man knows who he is. He's not chasing me. He's choosing himself. And in doing so, he becomes a gravitational force. Let's start with the first one, because it flips the dynamic of attention in a way that's both subtle and seismic. Boundary 1. The silent no. Refusing without guilt or justification. Here's a moment most men will recognize. She asks you to do something you don't want to do. Your gut says no. Your calendar screams no. Your energy is depleted, but your lips still say, "Sure, I guess I can try." And in that split second, you just sacrificed your clarity for her comfort. Saying no isn't what breaks attraction. Saying no with shame, with fidgeting, with explanations so long they start to sound like apologies. That's what drains the masculine edge. There's a quiet strength in a man who can say no, and mean it, not from cruelty but from clarity. Not, "I can't, I'm so sorry, but I won't be available then. Let's reconnect another time." Direct, respectful, complete. Why is this so attractive? Because the anima within her is attuned not just to your words, but to your inner self-respect. The moment she feels you betraying yourself to avoid upsetting her, her unconscious registers something vital. He's not rooted in anything. He'll bend to my mood. He doesn't trust himself enough to disappoint me. But the man who can withstand a woman's momentary discomfort, who doesn't need her constant approval, becomes a pillar she can lean into. Not because he's agreeable, but because he's dependable. Let her meet the version of you who says no with stillness, not explanation. Boundary 2. The subtle check, naming disrespect before it grows. There's a quiet moment that happens in almost every relationship between a man and a woman. It's not explosive. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. She makes a cutting remark, maybe a sarcastic comment about his job, a teasing joke in front of friends, or an eye roll when he's speaking from the heart. And in that moment, most men freeze. They hesitate. They laugh it off, tell themselves she's just joking, or worse, they shrink internally and say nothing at all. Why? Because we've been taught, almost from birth, that being a good man means being easygoing, polite, chill. That saying nothing when you're hurt is some kind of emotional strength. That ignoring disrespect is stoic. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What we call stoicism is often just fear in disguise. Fear of rocking the boat. Fear of being seen as insecure. Fear of losing her approval. And so, we let it slide. Again and again. But every time you let a moment like that pass, you're sending a message. Not just to her, but to yourself. And the message is this: my discomfort is less important than her feelings. You start abandoning your emotional truth just to keep the peace, and what you think is maturity slowly becomes invisibility. The thing is, women don't stop respecting men because they make mistakes. They stop respecting men when they sense those men have no edges, no emotional boundaries. And that's what's happening when she makes those subtle jabs. Often unconsciously, she's scanning for structure, not because she wants to start a fight, but because the anima within her, the feminine intelligence, wants to feel where your spine is. She wants to know, can this man hold his ground even when it's uncomfortable? Can he stay present without being reactive? Is he a wall she can lean on, or a door that opens every time the wind blows? So what should a man do in that moment? The answer isn't anger. It's not a confrontation. It's presence. You look her in the eye and say, calmly and without flinching, "I don't allow people to talk to me like that." Then you go silent. That silence? That's where the power lives. Because it's not the volume of your voice that sets the boundary. It's the stillness behind it. You're not trying to control her. You're simply telling the truth. And in that moment, everything changes. She may laugh. She may push back. But deep down, she feels it. Your center. Your refusal to betray yourself for her approval. And far from turning her off, that moment triggers something ancient in her psychology. Respect. Because a woman can only relax into her feminine softness when she feels the masculine is strong enough to hold her fire without crumbling. And that strength isn't about domination. It's about containment. A quiet, grounded edge that says, you can be wild, expressive, emotional, but you cannot cross this line without consequence. Ironically, it's this boundary, delivered gently but firmly, that allows her to feel safe. When a man shows that he won't abandon himself just to keep her comfortable, she starts to soften. Not because he made her feel better, but because he made her feel held. And this is where most men miss the mark. They think keeping the peace means avoiding all tension. But the truth is, peace without boundaries is just suppressed chaos. And it always erupts later, in resentment, withdrawal, or emotional collapse. So if you're a man who's been letting the little things slide, ask yourself this: are you avoiding conflict, or are you avoiding yourself? Are you being respectful, or are you afraid to be seen? Because every time you name the disrespect, calmly, directly, without shame, you reclaim a piece of your voice, a piece of your masculine structure. And in doing so, you don't just teach her how to treat you, you remind yourself that you are worth being treated with respect. And that, right there, is the difference between being liked and being remembered. Boundary 3, the power of distance. You don't need to be available to be desired. A man who always picks up the phone on the first ring, who instantly replies to every message, who says yes even when he's tired, that man is easy to love for a few weeks, but impossible to respect in the long run. Why? Because endless availability dissolves mystery. It removes the tension. It says to her, even without words, my time is empty. My life revolves around your attention. But here's what women will never admit openly. The man who's a little harder to reach, the one who takes his time to respond, not to play games, but because his time is truly full, is the one who ignites something deeper. It's not rejection she feels. It's gravity. It's curiosity. It's, what's going on in his world that I have to earn my way into it? When you honor your calendar, your solitude, your path, what you're saying is, I don't hand out energy cheaply. If you're in my space, it's because there's value on both sides. Women are biologically wired to be drawn to strength, and strength, at its core, is selective energy. It's not about ghosting or avoiding. It's about protecting the fire you're building. The man who has something better to do than obsess over her becomes the one she can't stop thinking about. Now let me ask you something real. Have you ever noticed that the less you chased, the more they came toward you? That's not a coincidence. That's the boundary at work. Boundary 4, authority through silence. Decide and move on. Here's what many men do. They say no, but then immediately start softening it. They explain, justify, apologize, and try to wrap their decision in pillows so she doesn't feel hurt. The result? Their confidence crumbles in real time. Let's break this down. You tell her, I can't come tonight. I'm wiped after a long week. Work's been rough, and I just need some rest. Hope that's okay. I feel bad. Maybe we can do something tomorrow? Now contrast that with, I won't make it tonight. Let's talk later this week. Same message, very different energy. The first version, long, careful, over-detailed, subtly asks for permission. You're not owning your schedule. You're negotiating your right to rest. The subtext, please don't be upset with me. But the second version? It's decisive, clear, grounded. You're not explaining your worth. You're simply moving forward from a place of self-trust. And that's the key word here, trust. A man who over-explains is often a man who doesn't trust his authority. He believes he needs to be understood to be accepted. He wants to avoid tension. But here's the paradox. Every time you try to make her feel better about your boundary, you leak a little power. She may not say anything, but subconsciously, she feels it. Your authority isn't in how much you say, it's in how little you need to say. When your words are clean and complete, they carry gravity. They don't wobble. They don't beg to be liked. And women feel that. Why does this boundary matter so much? Because a man who doesn't second-guess his no is rare. A man who can end a sentence with a period, not an apology, is a man who lives by internal law. That law says, my decisions are rooted. I don't owe explanations for being true to myself. And that calm silence after a clear statement, that's not emptiness. That's leadership. That's what the anima inside her craves. Not for you to be cold, but for you to be still. So here's your rule. Say what you mean, then say nothing else. Let the silence speak for you. Boundary 5. The unshakable core, emotional sovereignty in the face of her tests. Every high-value woman tests. Not to be cruel, but because, biologically and emotionally, the anima within her wants to feel the frame of the man she's engaging with. She might tease. She might bring up a topic that scratches your ego. She might question your decisions, push against your boundaries, or challenge your past. Most men panic. They get defensive. They over-explain. Or worse, they mirror her energy, becoming just as chaotic in the process. But the man she remembers, the one she dreams about long after the conversation ends, is the one who meets the storm with stillness. She makes a jab at your job, you smile. That's cute. You always flirt by challenging men? Boom. Frame held. Polarity intensified. Emotional gravity established. Because the feminine doesn't want a man who reacts. She wants a man who leads, not just with words, but with energy. A man whose self-concept is so stable that even when she pushes, he doesn't fall off balance. Women don't crave emotional weakness disguised as vulnerability. They crave strength that can stay open. They want to feel your heart, but only once they've felt your spine. If you've ever wondered why certain men seem to carry an unshakable presence, why their words land heavier, why their decisions are followed without debate, it usually comes down to this. They've mastered the art of clarity, not persuasion, not negotiation, not endless explaining, clarity. Because in a world where most men dilute their truth to avoid conflict, the one who speaks with authority, who owns his decisions without shrinking, becomes a rare signal in a sea of noise. Let's talk about the next boundary. It's one most men violate daily without even realizing it. Boundary 6. Purpose first. She's not the path, she walks beside it. This boundary is the most misunderstood and the most powerful. You'll hear a lot of advice out there telling you to prioritize your purpose. It sounds noble, masculine, strategic, but few men live it. Here's how most guys operate once they're emotionally invested in a woman. They begin shifting their schedule to accommodate her whims. They stop pursuing what they were building before she arrived. Their goals, once sharp and focused, become fuzzy. She's not asking them to change, not directly, but they're subtly adapting, bending, morphing, just to keep her close. And on the surface, it seems like love. It feels like intimacy. But underneath, The polarity is dying. Here's the core truth. When a woman senses that she has become your mission, she begins to lose trust, not in you, but in the structure of the relationship. Because the anima inside her does not want to be the center of your world. She wants to feel pulled into something larger. Something was alive before her. Something you were committed to long before she ever walked in. It could be your business, your fitness, your craft, your vision of impact. Whatever it is, she wants to orbit a man already in motion, not a man who halts his journey the moment she says yes. Masculine purpose is directional. It's vertical. It doesn't flatten itself to avoid discomfort. It doesn't break stride to hold hands at every corner. When she sees you locked in, when your mornings are sacred, when your evenings reflect discipline, when your time is guarded by what you're building, she feels a surge of safety, even if she's not consciously aware of it. Because it signals something she needs to feel to trust you long term. You cannot be moved by emotional weather. This boundary, the mission first code, doesn't mean neglect. It doesn't mean you never adapt, but it means your center stays fixed. You lead with direction, not reaction. You invite her into your world, but you don't abandon it to enter hers. And here's what's ironic. The more you stick to your mission, the more she leans in. The more she feels that your fire burns with or without her, the more she wants to stand close to it. That's not arrogance, that's magnetism. Because when you place your mission above her mood, what you're saying is, I love being with you, but I won't betray the man I'm becoming to keep you comfortable. And that message? It's more intoxicating than any text, gift, or performance. So if you ever catch yourself rearranging your world to fit her emotional needs, ask this. Would I respect myself if I saw this from the outside? The woman you truly want doesn't want to be your purpose. She wants to witness it, and she wants to know that even in your deepest love for her, you still wake up with something bigger to serve. Here's what most men don't realize when they start building boundaries. They think it's about managing women, keeping distance, saying no, protecting their time. But those are just the surface-level expressions. The deeper truth? Boundaries are not about control. They're about self-definition. Every time you say no, every time you stop over-explaining, every time you choose purpose over comfort, you're not just setting a rule. You're telling the world who you are, and more importantly, who you refuse to stop being. Most men live reactive lives. They adapt to whoever is in front of them. They soften their opinions, shift their schedules, smile when they're frustrated, and say yes when their chest is screaming no. Not because they're weak, but because they've been trained to think that approval equals worth. That is love. That constant availability is loyalty. But deep down, they feel it. The resentment that builds when their truth gets buried. The quiet shame after giving away their time to someone who didn't even earn it. The hollow feeling of being seen, but not respected. That's what boundaries protect. Not your time, not your calendar, your dignity. A woman might never say it out loud, but she feels it. When you let things slide that cut you, when you bend to avoid a moment of conflict, when you rush to explain your decisions as if your clarity needs permission, she might smile. She might even appreciate it, for a while. But underneath that, something begins to shift. Her respect fades. Her attraction cools. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing something vital. You stopped leading. A man without boundaries isn't a safe man. He's an unstable one. Because if you're always adapting to her emotions, to her moods, to her desires, how can she trust you to stand firm when things get hard? How can she relax into her softness when your frame is bending at every turn? The irony is brutal. The more you sacrifice your edge to be liked, the less she can trust the structure you offer. And she won't even know why. She'll just start to pull away. She'll test more. She'll complain that you've changed, that something feels off. And you'll sit there confused, thinking you've done everything right. You've been kind, supportive, available. But what you haven't been is anchored. Masculine boundaries anchor the dynamic, not just romantically, but energetically. They tell her, without words, I won't lose myself in you. You're invited to join me, not to replace me. And that message, that quiet confidence, touches something in the female unconscious that words never could. When she sees you holding the line, standing calmly in your truth, not reacting to every shift in her mood, not trying to win her over with your flexibility, something inside her settles. She feels safer, not because you gave her what she wanted, but because you showed her who you are when pressure rises. There's a deeper layer to this, one that Carl Jung would have understood well. When a man starts developing his boundaries, what he's doing is integrating his anima. He's no longer projecting the feminine part of his psyche onto every woman he meets. He's not looking for her to complete him. He doesn't need her approval to validate his manhood. He carries his inner emotional intelligence, his anima, within, and because of that, he no longer tries to merge with her. He relates to her, with structure, with clarity, with respect. When a man is whole inside, he doesn't cling, he doesn't chase, he doesn't panic when the connection wavers. He simply returns to the center, and that return, back to purpose, back to structure, back to mission, is what makes him magnetic, not just because of what it gives to her, but because of what it protects inside him. Every boundary you set echoes beyond the moment. When you protect your time, you're not just avoiding burnout, you're honoring your value. When you refuse to justify a simple decision, you're not being cold, you're trusting your voice. When you walk away from a dynamic that disrespects your standards, you're not quitting, you're aligning. And this alignment doesn't just change how women see you, it changes how you see yourself. Because the more you live in integrity with your boundaries, the less you rely on anyone else to tell you who you are. You stop needing her validation. You stop performing. You stop shape-shifting just to be accepted. You start walking into every room, every relationship with the quiet confidence of a man who isn't trying to be enough. He already knows he is. And he's simply deciding who's aligned with that truth. What happens next is almost mystical. Women respond, not just with words, but with energy. She slows down around you. She listens differently. She stops testing so much. Her walls soften. Because when you hold your boundaries, she finally feels like she can let go of hers. You stop being another man she has to manage, and start becoming a man she can trust. And that trust, it's not built through flowers or charm or declarations. It's built when she feels your boundaries before you ever have to speak them. When your time has weight, when your silence has meaning, when your presence isn't performing, it's just there, solid, unmoved. This is the turning point. When you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself, the game changes. You no longer ask, how do I get her to like me? You ask, does this connection align with my values, my mission, my rhythm? And that shift, that's what separates the man who waits for attraction from the man who commands it. So the question isn't, which line will impress her? The real question is, which line have you been afraid to draw? Because the truth is, you don't need better pickup lines. You don't need to become smoother or cooler or more agreeable. You need to become sovereign. And sovereignty is born from a boundary. Let her feel the man who says no without fear. Let her feel the man who doesn't flinch at her storm. Let her feel the man who protects his fire, not because he's hard, but because he's focused. That man is unforgettable. And the best part? When you live this way, when you embody these boundaries, not as tricks, but as extensions of who you are, you stop asking for love. You start attracting devotion, not because you forced it, but because of your presence, your truth, and your frame made she felt something that most men never do. Safe enough to finally be feminine.